There are different groups here that have worked on voting rights. And you know what, I can stand right in front of you guys, so move over here. There are different groups here that have worked on voting rights, have worked on getting money out of politics. And these are the legislation issues that we're working on. Our Voting Rights Advancement Act. We are fighting for the Voter Rights, Voter Empowerment Act, and then the Democracy for All Amendment. So today we're going to be talking about solutions. Some of the different tactics that the Move On organization has worked on include petitions. We did an action this week right in front of the steps of the Supreme Court to really demand that the president's nomination, Judge Garland, is voted on. And the obstruction that the GOP has really laid out is really, it's over. Because the polling of the American people have said that they are disagreeing with this obstructionist. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. But we're not going to just talk at you. We're going to also provide some time to let you all ask questions, because we really want to be solution-oriented and really be collective in our work together. So thank you very much.
Try that again. We're going to hear from Chris Melody Fields Figueroa, who is a campaign manager for election protection. And that is a project run by the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. For those of you who don't know, they are the people who on election day are manning the phone lines and talking to voters and telling them how they can make their vote count. They're showing them where they can vote online. They're sort of really helping with the nuts and bolts of allowing people to exercise their right to vote. And on every other day of the year, too, they're doing that work.
Thanks, Matt. I was about to say, it's not just election day, because this work is 365 days a year. We are thinking about our elections on election day, we're going to lose, right? This work does not start or stop on election day. So, my name is Chris Melody Fields Figueroa from the Lawyers Committee. I feel, because I'm in a room of activists, I am not a lawyer. I'm one of you. I'm an organizer, and I have the privilege of leading our voter protection program, election protection. I'm going to talk about some state stuff. I don't think I need to tell this room what has been happening, that we've been under attack. I don't think I need to tell this room that who our enemy is, right? We know who is trying to restrict the right to vote. We know who is against our voice and our full participation in our democracy. So I'm not going to talk about the bad stuff. I'm going to talk about the real solutions to move us forward. And I'm going to be looking at my phone for my notes. I'm not tweeting right now. So we've seen the bad things. We've seen the cutbacks to early voting. We've seen the rollbacks on same-day registration. We've seen the voter ID laws. And we know the enemy of democracy under the guise of preventing voter fraud and securing the integrity of our elections. But I think the real threat to the integrity of our election is voter participation. We have the best democracy in the world. That's what we've been telling ourselves, right? Yet we have one of the lowest participation rates. And I think what we have to really think about is, how do we remove those barriers to entry? So when you think about voting in the process, what is the first step? Besides being 18 or a US citizen? Registration, absolutely. That is the first way to get a part of our process. And we've really been making a lot of ground in the last couple years around two specific areas. Online voter registration. 31 states plus DC now offer online voter registration, and 4 states have passed it. So what we need to do is clean up those 15 other states, right? And we need to think about, what does online voter registration look like? Most states it's just at the DMV. Are we going to be states like Delaware, where you can upload any type of electronic signature and be able to register online? So what we need to go back to our states where we do have online voter registration, how do we expand it to public assistance agencies so we bring more of our brothers and sisters into this process? And how do we look at other ways that we capture signatures so people can come online? The other thing that we're seeing is automatic voter registration. We saw it happen in Oregon last year, we saw it happen in California, and now 2/3 of the country have put forth a proposal for some type of automatic voter registration. And I think the really key thing about automatic voter registration, it removes the burden from the voter, the individual, and puts it on the government. They are required to automatically register people and put them on the rolls. And I think if we are talking about the first step, that is the first barrier entry, and that's what we need to be leading with, is removing that first barrier and getting people into the process. Thinking about the states where this is happening, just a couple weeks ago, it passed an automatic voter registration passed in West Virginia, but I want to talk about in Virginia the context of compromise. They also got that with the voter ID bill. And we need to be thinking about, when we are pushing for a solution, what we are not willing to give up. And that's one of the things that I want you guys to take back is, yeah, we want some good things, but we also don't want to go 3 steps back either. So thinking about the states where we have the biggest chance to move this year, Illinois, it'll be on the ballot in Alaska. Maryland, just right around the corner, has a really good chance of moving this year. In Vermont, just passed and is going to the governor's desk. So this is where we are winning and where we have to keep pushing in order to get the democracy that we want. The other place that I think is really important for all of us as a community really think about, that are going to bring much more of our brothers and sisters into the process, is rights restoration. I think the panel right before in this room was on the connection between criminal justice and democracy, and that is a key thing that we should all be working on in our states, is bringing our brothers and sisters who have served their time and getting them back onto the voter registration and getting them to participate in our democracy. And again, just right around the corner in Maryland, they started early voting on Thursday. 40,000 people will automatically have their rights restored, and there are groups like Community United that are working to register those individuals to vote and turning them out for this primary election. So if you want something to do, if you know you got a couple of extra hours, or if you're in DC a couple days after the awakening, go over to Maryland, because that's where the work is really happening right now. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about, so if you were here earlier this morning, you heard Artie Berman talk about what we've lost with the Voting Rights Act being gutted, right? One of the key things that we lost was notice, right? We do not know now the states that have had a history of voting discrimination: Alabama, Georgia, Florida, all those places where for all the time that we know have been really not leading with moving our country forward. They are no longer subject to federal review. So did anybody hear what happened in Maricopa County, Arizona? Yeah. We saw those lines, 5-hour lines, people standing in the sun, wanting to participate in our democracy. And had we had the Voting Rights Act, if we had that federal review, Arizona was covered. And we would have been able to stop that. So what I need you guys to go and do is go back to your communities, go to your Board of Election meetings, go to your county clerk meetings. We need to know what these changes are happening and stopping them before they happen, because come general election, we're going to be in a really bad place if we don't stop these voting changes before they happen. But what my sister, Ellen Buckman, will say, who's working so hard on the VRAA, is we need evidence. We need to tell Congress, we need to tell the Supreme Court that this problem that we know in this room exists, we have to document it. So Zach mentioned election protection. We have the 866 Our Vote hotline. I want everybody to get your phones out, put it in your phone, write it on your refrigerator, tell your friends about it, call us and tell us about the problems that are happening, and we're going to work to find solutions. So that's what I want to leave you with is, I need you guys to go back home, and I need you guys to fight with me. And I think these are some of the things that we really need help with. And if anything you do not forget today is, remember 866 Our Vote. That is our hotline. That's where you can call and report things, and that's where we'll happen you. And we need you to join us in this fight.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And we're right on time, I think. So next we're going to hear from John Bonifaz, who is the co-founder and president of Free Speech for People, which is really one of the most kind of innovative groups out there on the legal front, working to reduce the influence of big money in politics. So he's going to talk about what he does and how people can get involved in that.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. I'm honored to be with all of you. You know, all of you are change makers in this room. And the first thing you have is the capacity to be a change maker is to imagine a different reality. Imagine a different reality enables us all to create that different reality. So I'm inspired to be among all of you. I'm going to talk about two solutions in terms of dealing with big money in politics and unchecked corporate power. One is challenging the Citizens United ruling and the doctrines underlying that ruling with the 28th Amendment to overturn it and to demand more democracy. That means ending the fiction of money equaling speech and ending the fiction of corporations being treated as people with constitutional rights. Both need to be abolished. And the second solution I'm going to talk about that we all together can get involved in is creating test cases in the courts to challenge Citizens United and these doctrines, to fight back in the courts while we fight in the streets for a 28th Amendment. Now, when we launched Free Speech for People, Jeff Clements is the co-founder with me at Free Speech for People. When we launched this on the day of Citizens United more than 6 years ago, there were plenty of skeptics who thought you could not build a movement for a 28th Amendment to the Constitution, that we just can't. It's not just via the state legislatures. Two of those states have put it on the ballot, Montana and Colorado, 75% voting for a 28th Amendment to the Constitution. And you know what? We're already winning in the cities and towns and communities all across this country. More than 650 cities and towns all across this nation have joined the call for a constitutional amendment. And then they said, well, you know what? They'll never vote on it in the Congress. They'll never vote on it. September 2014, 54 United States senators voted for the Democracy for All Amendment. We are already winning. The second solution that I'm going to offer that we can all organize around, because we've got to keep pushing these resolutions calling for an amendment wherever you may be, and if you're in a community you've already called for it, push it again. We need to keep the pressure going. But in addition to these resolutions, in addition to be putting them on the ballot where we can, we need to help create the test cases in the courts. And this is how all of you can help do that. At Free Speech for People, we're prepared to help defend ordinances at the city council level, legislature, bills at the state level that get passed that overturn Citizens United. They say, we're going to ban corporate money in our elections, to bring it back to the court. We also think that super PAC spending that was unleashed by a lower court ruling, a D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, goes way beyond what even the Citizens United majority envisioned. And that can be challenged via even in the courts, passing laws that set overall spending limits and bringing it back to the justices and to judges all around this country. We need a parallel track. While we fight for an amendment, we fight in the courts, and we fight and reclaim our democracy back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Next, we're going to hear from Will Roberts, who is the Legislative Director of the Every Voice Center. Did you want to go next?
We're trading the mic back and forth.
And they are a group that works in state legislatures and in Washington to do that work of reducing the influence of money in politics.
Thank you very much. How's everybody doing? Well, you can do better than that. How are y'all doing? Great. Well, hello, Democracy fight the influence of big money in politics, but we're really trying to elevate the voices of everyday people around the country. And, I'm going to talk about small donor systems, but before I do that and talk about the policy, I really want to talk about the value behind it. That's power. And as progressives, we don't always like to use the word power. Sometimes we think it's bad, it's an evil word. The folks on the other side use power, but we need to be comfortable talking about our power, right? We need to be comfortable talking about how we get our power back in this system, in our electoral systems, and changing the way that campaigns are financed. It's all about power. It's about who has the power and who has the voice in our democracy and who doesn't. It's about who elected officials listen to and who they don't. And so that's what Every Voice works on every day. And so small donor elections are very simple. It's a very simple concept that a candidate running for office comes to you as a regular person, says, I want to hear about the things that you care about at your kitchen table. I want to hear about what you and your coworkers are concerned about. And I want to go and advocate for that in whatever chamber I'm serving in or whatever executive office I'm holding, instead of that candidate going to big money, deep-pocketed special interests to talk about what they want to talk about. And so it's something that is not just a good idea, it's not just academic, it's something that we have in place right now and something that's alive and moving through the country. And so I want to spend my time talking to you about that. So there are systems in place right now in 32 jurisdictions around the country at the state level, at the local level, where in some form of government, folks have decided that rather than having their elected officials cater to big money interests, they're going to have their elected officials cater to them. They're going to have candidates that are fueled and funded by regular people and regular donations. And if you look at states like Connecticut, where an overwhelming majority of their state legislature runs and wins on their small donor system, they've been able to pass things like increases to the earned income tax credit. They've been able to pass one of the strongest gun safety pieces of legislation around the country. It's okay to clap for progressive policy. They've been able to do all of these things in the face of moneyed opposition. And so when we talk about these things, we have to look at where they're working, how they're operating, right? So it's in 32 jurisdictions all across the country. Just last year, folks went to the ballot in Maine and Seattle to pass new public financing systems, new small donor election systems. You clap for that. It is a good thing when people want to take back their democracies, so don't be afraid to support that. But they went to the ballot to support those systems in their states, in their cities, to say that it's time for us to take our democracy back. And this year, you have an opportunity to do that as well in your hometowns and where you come from, in your states. So there are a number of systems at the ballot right now in Miami-Dade County in Florida, in Idaho. I look at my list to make sure I don't miss any of them. So Miami-Dade County in Florida, Arizona, Howard County, just outside of the D.C. border. There are reform proposals in Idaho and Arkansas. There's a voucher system in the works in Washington State. And so these are things that are in the works that need your energy, that need your voice to say it's time for us to take our democracy back. But you can add to this expanded map. I talked about the 32 jurisdictions. We don't want that to be just 32. We want that to be 100, 200, however many small cities and towns and municipalities we have in the country. We want your voices and your energy to pass that. You mentioned that my main role is to work on a federal system. If you were upstairs this afternoon, you heard Congressman John Sarbanes, who's a great champion for small donor democracy, talk about the efforts that he's doing at the federal level. But one thing he said that I think is really important is to remember that folks on Capitol Hill are not going to do this for the federal system until we do this at home around the country. And so it's very important, right? DC is often way behind everybody else in the country. And so it's very important that folks here talk to people that they know back home, because we know that this room is not the entirety of the room that needs to be working on this, right? Not just that everybody here, knows different people who are interested in this, but that this room is not representative of the demographic makeup of the coalition we need, right? Because one of the great things about small donor democracy is that it incentivizes people of color, women, folks from different backgrounds to be able to run and win viable elections and to be able to become donors and become important. It is the job. And that's critical, right? That's critical that we have a democracy and elected officials that look like the people they represent. So it's critical that we get these things passed. We need your voice. We need your energy. If you want to learn more about these campaigns, you can go to everyvoice.org, or you can see anybody here in an Every Voice shirt. Thanks.
Thanks, Will. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Ellen Buckman, who is an Executive Vice President at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is one of the most prominent and respected civil rights groups in the country. In addition to the work that they've been doing on restoring the Voting Rights Act to its full strength, they also have been at the forefront of the effort to demand a hearing and a vote on the President's Supreme Court nominee, which obviously is a crucial piece of the sort of democratic puzzle that we're all fighting for. So, Tara, she's going to talk about that.
Mic on? Yep. Fired up? Ready to go. Fired up? Ready to go. Fired up? Ready to go. Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, panel. Two things real quick before I get to the topic at hand. One, I got to tip my hat to this beautiful church. And I got to say thank you to those of you who are responsible for putting it out there for us. So thank you. I shared with my good friend Marge Baker, where are you, Marge? Right in the back, who I have the pleasure of working with pretty much every day, that I was in this beautiful church just last weekend for a wedding. And this goes to the point right away because it was a wedding of two very dear friends who are lesbians who now can get married in the District of Columbia. And what that says to me is that if we do our job and if we're fired up and if we're ready to go, fired up, then we will win. Then we will win. What that also says to me is that in coalition there is strength. And we didn't win marriage equality without coalition, just like we're not going to win on any of these without coalition, right? So I happen to work for the largest and oldest, biggest and baddest civil and human rights coalition this country has ever seen. We were founded more than 60 years ago in the heyday of the civil rights movement, and I can tell you that the civil rights movement ain't over. It ain't over. Now, thank you. So I'm going to get to the point, and I only got a couple of minutes, and I really want to keep it to that because I really want to hear from folks in this room because I am getting a huge amount of inspiration from all of you on a whole mess of issues that I could go off on, but I was asked to go off on one in particular, and that is President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, for the United States Supreme Court. I'm not going to go off on Merrick Garland. I'm not. We can talk a lot about Merrick Garland. We can talk about why President Obama nominated him and not somebody else. We can get into the weeds about that, y'all, and I can assure you that our opponents want us to do that. Let's not, right? Let's not. Let's go instead to the point at hand. It is a point that is fairly basic. In what industry can you get away with not doing your job, right, without consequence? And that's what this really, really boils down to. That's what it boils down to. So, I'm going to go over a couple quick stats, and I'm going to relate it to the issue, and I'm going to tell you how we need your help in reminding the United States Senate that they need to what? Do their job. Okay, so I would not be doing my job if I didn't relate this to a topic that is broader than the United States Supreme Court. It is the United States federal judiciary. There are currently 93 vacancies at the federal judiciary level. 93. How does that relate to this? The president gets to nominate, the Senate gets to confirm. There are currently 93 vacancies in the federal judiciary. In 32 of those courts, there is not currently a single nominee. Right? Now, how does that relate to this, Ellen? That relates to the point. Do your job. How? United States senators are supposed to do what? Advise and consent and help the president determine nominees to the federal judiciary. There are 32 without a nominee in the 93 vacancies. There are 49 people who have been nominated that have not been voted on. So we say, what?
Do your job.
Thank you. And then there are 34 of those, 34 that not only have not been voted on, have not been voted on in the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is the Senate Judiciary Committee. Anyone here from Iowa? Okay. Thank you. You called me right back out. Look, let me just tell you something. Our friend here from Iowa is not the only person who should be stopping by Senator Chuck Grassley's office to tell him what?
Do your job.
We all need to be stopping by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley's office to tell him to do his job. Why? Because in his committee of jurisdiction, there are 34 nominees to the federal court system, including Merrick Garland, that have not received a vote in his committee. Historic numbers, guys. They need to do their job. Now, I'm going to ask some friends up here to help me do my job and just hand these out. These are palm cards that will go through some of this just a little bit, and they tell you specifically where this president has already nominated how senators need to be doing their job. Number one, with respect to Merrick Garland, I'm sure you've been hearing that some of these Republican senators have finally agreed to meet with Judge Garland. It ain't enough to meet with Judge Garland, but for those who have not met with Judge Garland, if you're up in the Hill, go by their office and say, do your job. Point one, meet with Judge Garland. That's the first chance you get. Number two, hold a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing for Judge Garland. Senator Grassley and all senators, quite frankly, need to hear this because they're all kind of falling in line and making it seem as though we didn't have a role in selecting this president or this Judiciary Committee that needs to be told to do its job. And I'm talking really fast because I gotta stop. Number three, we need to have a vote in Senate Judiciary Committee. And the fourth opportunity to do your job is to hold a floor vote. And that's where Senator Mitch McConnell comes in, guys. Now, on this palm card, you will see, and it says it better than I can even say it now. Yeah, you can do it this. Senator Mitch McConnell basically saying in cartoon form that this president is only going to get 3/5 of a term, right? And so therefore, the people must speak and we're going to wait for the next president to do its job. Now, I got to say, guys, that's what this boils down to. It boils down to politics, and it boils down to the fact that they think they can roll us, and they can't. So let's stay awake in this beautiful democracy awakening. Let's enjoy this coalition. Let's do our jobs, and let's push back. We're making huge amounts of progress on this, and we need to continue the fight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks to all the panelists. If everyone could fill out the cards that were distributed earlier, if you want to ask a question, and then we'll collect them in a little bit. So please just fill them out quite as quick as you can, so we can get them up here and get them asked. And in the meantime, I'll kick things off. We got about 12 or 14 minutes for questions. I want to know from any of the panelists that wants to address this. Everybody, in theory, should believe in democracy, not just people who usually we think of as on our side. So are there ways that we can reach out to people who are often on the other side to sort of impress on them the threats that are faced to democracy that affect everybody, and work with them on this too?
I can just say something briefly. You know, there's a common misconception that small donor systems are only supported by progressives or Democrats. That's in fact not true. If you look at the state level, there are lots of elected officials that are Republicans, that are conservative, that support small donor elections in, is it Minnesota? I'm looking at my boss because I know. In Minnesota, we have a legislative champion who's a Republican who wanted to introduce the system and support it. And I think the reason is because it's not about electing, you can't go to them and say, hey, this is about electing progressives and Democrats. That's who I want to elect. But you have to talk to them at a values level, I think, right? It's about the value of looking at an electoral system and realizing that your voice is not being translated into who you're electing into office. So it's about people wanting to elevate their voice. And I'll say one other thing. There's an interesting, I think, curve if you look on the extreme right, the Tea Party movement. There are Tea Party activists who, if you listen to them, you gotta listen to what they're saying. But if you listen to some of what they're saying, a lot of it, and at least especially at the beginning, was about establishment politics outweighing the voices of the people, about their representatives not listening to them. And so there's somewhere in the ether, right, where we can connect along this strand of us not agreeing on political issues and us being politically polar opposites, but us being connected at a values level that I think we need to start talking about, just in the small donor round, that's what I'll say.
I would just add to that, you know, similarly to what Will just talked about, with respect to the constitutional amendment fight, we've seen across the board widespread support for the call for an amendment. We have on our site at freespeechforpeople.org a report we issued showing that more than 130 Republican elected officials in all these states where there have been resolutions have voted for these resolutions. So it's actually not the case that this is only some big D Democratic issue or a progressive issue. This is something that appeals across the political spectrum. The case I mentioned with respect to Montana voting 75% for this call for an amendment, that was the same day, Election Day 2012, where 55% of the voters in Montana voted to elect Mitt Romney to be president. So clearly, I think there's even greater support for this call for an amendment across the political spectrum than for their own nominee.
And I'll add one small thing is the reason I talked about voter registration is online voter registration has been a bipartisan effort. The President's Commission on Election Administration talked about it. Both the top Republican lawyer, the top lawyer for the Dems, they came together and made these recommendations. Like, it is cleanup time on online voter registration. It is bipartisan support, and there is no reason, when we talk about our democracy and when you talk about organizing, you meet people where they are, right? People are online, they are on their phones, they're at their computers. Online voter registration just makes sense. And so I think that's a solution, like, without a doubt, that is bipartisan, that we can get done without a doubt.
Okay, we got more questions here than we're going to have time to get to, but here's a great practical one for Ellen Buckman. The questioner says, my senators are liberal. Does it help for me to contact conservatives from other states?
The short answer is absolutely. It does. And it also... Mic adjustment here. It also, irrespective of whether your senators are Democrats or Republicans, two things. They need to be contacted. They need to either be told, attaboy, attagirl, keep pushing. Really, 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 really important. They need to be told that because they have to keep pushing. And if they're Republicans, they need to be told that they have to do their jobs. We want this thing to get so much heat on the majority leader that he wants it to go away. And if I weren't, I need to let you know particular states that we're really focused on this in, and this is not going to surprise any of you, because we do really believe that if the political heat can be turned up in states like Pennsylvania, where you have Senator Toomey, in states like New Hampshire, where you have Ayotte, in states like Ohio, where you have Portman, and in states like Wisconsin, where you have Senator Johnson, all senators that are up for re-election, and we can turn up the heat to the point where they want this thing to go away, then we will see a vote. And that is the whole point on this. And we have made tremendous progress. The polling suggests it. Some of their actions have suggested it. Senator Kirk in Illinois actually told the Senate to man up. I mean, honestly. So that says that we have been doing our job really well, and we need to keep it on up. Thanks so much.
Another questioner asks, how do you convince naysayers that their voice matters? Everyone I talk to, and I'm sure this feeling is shared, thinks they have no power, and that if something could happen, it already would have. We need everyone. So how do you go out and sort of fight against that cynicism? Anybody want to take that on?
Someone talked about digital media and the digital tools. Chris just talked about the fact that we are, as Americans, we're online. We all have tools that are at our disposal. And a lot of our progressive fights that have happened historically have not been short fights. They've been long, protracted fights. And now, as progressives, we have so many more tools at our disposal. So we have to continue pushing at it. We have to continue using petitions. We have to continue picking up the phone and calling. We have to continue making rallies, hosting rallies, showing up to rallies, and we have to continue in some instances to push where we haven't pushed before. So you don't want to stop when you think that it is a hard fight. Civil rights, LGBT rights, all of those fights were long, long fights. And civil rights and LGBT fights, all those fights are continuing. So we have to continue, and we can never give up.
Okay, here's an interesting one. This question says, tell me what is more important to fight for. Getting Bernie elected, and I would add getting whatever candidate you support elected, or local national campaign finance reform measures. Please don't say both.
Since they mentioned local campaign financial measures, I guess that's for me. So the question is, what's the... All right, I'll hold it like this. What's more important, the presidential election, let's say, or passing local and state campaign finance reform measures? So, I mean, I think you can't look at this as, I'm not going to say, I won't give you the both answer, even though I'll say both, but you can't look at this as sort of incremental steps that we can take, like we can elect a good president, we can pass a measure here, we can pass a measure here. I think we gotta, and as evidenced by folks being here from, not just, I imagine folks here are not just from DC, right? How many folks in here are not from DC? So I think your being here actually answers that question, right? Because if your thought process was, well, we got to take care of this Bernie Hillary thing and then figure out this Trump Cruz thing, then you wouldn't be here worried about how you can push in your state to pass an amendment or to pass a resolution that says pass an amendment, how you can work at your local level, your state level to pass small donor reform, how you can push your senator on the intransigence of the stupidity of not doing their job and voting for a senator. So I think you answered the question yourself by being here and realizing that this is a fight that we have to do at the same time everywhere around the country. And that's my answer.
Well said. Well said. I gotta say, elections matter, guys. And the next president, whether it's Bernie, Hillary, Trump, or Cruz, is going to be able to possibly pick up to 3 new Supreme Court justices. And that includes Merrick Garland, assuming that gets saved for next year if we aren't successful. So I got to look at it and I got to say, if we don't vote, we don't count. If we don't count, it ain't our business to complain. So we better freaking win this election. I'm not going to say for Bernie, I'm not going to say for Hillary. I'm just going to say our values have got to win this election. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't fill that out.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to answer this next one. Somebody asked, what is the hotline for voter suppression? And is there a backup internet site to post stories? This is a good idea. We need a central location nationwide to submit voter suppression stories. I would first of all say me at MSNBC would love to be that central location, but I'm sure there's other places too.
Well, it's not the voter suppression hotline. We're a bit more empowering than that. It's our vote. This is our democracy. So that is 866 our vote 687 8683 866 687 8683. And you know, as Ellen said, this is a coalition, so para español. 888 Ve y Vota. I don't have the numbers memorized as well as our hotline. So write all these numbers down, right? Because you have brothers and sisters in every community, right? So 888 Ve y Vota. And then Asian languages, 888 API vote. So write all 3 of those down. And just to answer sort of the 2 other questions earlier, I always think of the Chumbawamba song. I get knocked down, but I get up again, right? We have been down many, many times, right? But any movements, you get knocked down and you get back up again, and we cannot stop this fight, right? It might be bad sometimes, but we know it's going to be better at other times. And all these fights have been critical, and why they're so critical. You know, we're all talking about the presidential election, but I really want you guys to think about local and state elections. That is where we have been losing, and the only way for us to win this movement, to change this movement and put it on the right side, is local and state elections. When I talked about voter participation, it goes down considerably when you talk about local elections. So every election, like my sister Ellen Buckman said, matters, and we have to turn out for them. Oh, and the website, absolutely. I mean, Zach, I know you guys you've been collecting some stories, right? But you know, we do have our website where you can find information. We've been collecting them through the hotline, but it's something that I will take back to the community. 866 our vote.
We got time for probably two more. Somebody asked, how do we get online voter registration, and maybe I might add automatic voter registration in all 50 states? How do we move polling locations that are convenient for everyone and not just rich white people?
So I think I said it, local and state elections, right? And what I said earlier, going to those Board of Election meetings. I mean, the unfortunate thing about what happened in Maricopa County, that was a closed-door meeting, right? So we weren't invited to that meeting. They made that decision without us. But had we known, maybe we had someone that was within that room, maybe we would have found out. We didn't find out until 10 p.m. the night before. How the heck are we can we stop that? The only way is for us to be active and engaged at our local election meetings. Like, we have to go to those meetings, hear what they're talking about, and push back. We have to stop these things before they happen. And that's absolutely critical. So with online voter registration, I said, we only have 15 states left. There is no reason that those 15 states in the next, year or two don't come online and provide it. And we have to go to those states and say, listen, join the movement. You guys are behind the times for not having this, so that's critical.
So just a footnote to what Chris said. On Maricopa County, some people are not aware that what happened there was the county made the decision to close polling places, and they used the excuse that they didn't have the money to keep them open. And they did that in places with large numbers of mainly Latino communities of color where they voted. Had the Voting Rights Act Section 5 still been a tool that we could have used, Maricopa County would have had to get pre-clearance. It would have had to get, the clearance to do that. And not to say that we wouldn't have been in that hot mess, but those lines were long because the polling places were inadequate, and as Chris said, we need to be in the room, and they need to be faced with having to pre-clear with people like us in the room. So I'm just adding some more texture so that you know that that is the outcome of being in the room, and it's why we need to restore the Voting Rights Act.
Woo! Okay, we got a chance for one more quick one, and then we're going to go to our state breakout groups. So the questioner asked, what would be some great ways to teach a community, mine specifically, about the importance of voting and the process that has to be done? Anyone want to take that on?
So, has anyone heard about this musical called Hamilton? I feel like this is a real teachable moment for us, right? One of the lines in My Shot that I always think about is, this is not a moment, it's the movement, where the hungriest brothers and sisters, was not a line in the song, was something to prove went. Foes oppose us, we take it on a stand, we roll like Moses, claiming our promised land. What is that promised land for us? That's our democracy, and I think it's been amazing to see how people have been really excited about the history of our country, the start of our country, talking about it through hip-hop, talking about it in a really approachable way. Like, to get people excited, you have to talk about it in a way they understand and that they can get excited about. So I think this is a really good opportunity to look at what's been happening through Hamilton, and I know they've been doing some work with the schools. Like, how do we take this and we spread it across?
And I would just add, I'll take the question, just extend it a little bit. So the importance of voting, but also the importance of organizing. I think we all got to get out and vote. There's no question we got to get out and vote. But we also have to organize. And we have to recognize, back to an earlier question in terms of, how do we see the change happening, that we look at our history. We look at our history. Women did not get the right to vote in this country because men in power thought it was a good idea. They fought, they organized, and they died for the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. African Americans did not bring down Jim Crow South. Did not bring down segregation laws in this country because whites in power thought it was a good idea. They organized, they fought, and they died in the civil rights movement. Labor did not make its gains in the 1930s because business interests in power thought it was a good idea. They organized, they fought, and they died in the labor movement. We need to build and keep building a democracy movement for our time, for our generation, and for future generations to say, we too we too are going to get out and we're going to organize. And you know, one other measure by figuring out how we're winning is determining whether the opposition is showing up to fight. Mahatma Gandhi said, first, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then they fight you. Then you win. Well, you know what? They're no longer ignoring us. They're no longer laughing at us. They're fighting us now, and we're going to win!
Okay, on that note, we've got so many more great questions here, but we're not going to have a chance to get to them, unfortunately, because we do need to get on to these state breakout sessions. And there's no point in doing all this if we don't give you guys a chance to get with your people from your states and figure out how you're going to get involved. So thanks to the panelists. Thanks even more to everybody here.